welcome back to another episode of Stripped by Sia, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between. I am your host, Steph Sia, aka Kimchi on stage, aka Sia on camera, online. I have been a sex worker since 2013, so it's been a little while. Started off as a sugar baby, moved my way into stripping, and then of course adult content creation, fetish work, and I've just been around for a little while, documenting my experiences a long time ago in the form of a blog, and then 5 years ago starting this podcast. Not to document my own time here in the industry, but actually to just talk about the lived experiences of sex workers. First starting off with just my peers, and then it kind of snowballed into something else because COVID happened, and then I couldn't do in-person interviews anymore. And I was like, I guess I'll begrudgingly start to do everything online and virtual. And here we are 5 years later, and the show's still going on and now reaching a global audience. So that has been really, really great, and I'm very thankful for that. But if you're new here, this show is all about destigmatizing sex work. I do that by bringing different guests onto the show every single week to talk about their corner of the industry. And it's not always people that are completely involved or participating in sex work, but I also speak to different organizations that might help sex worker rights, or on the advocacy front, or in policy, even professors that teach about sex work, talking about even I did a couple episodes with clients at some point to gather their perspective. So really just trying to bring on different players in the industry to really illustrate a really more accurate portrayal of what sex work actually looks like to people, because as we'll be discussing in today's episode, we're going to be talking about, inaccuracies or maybe sensationalized views of sex work. And, that's often in the media, in documentaries, in a lot of media that we consume. So we are going to be bringing on our guest, who I'll be announcing very shortly, to speak about, ethical storytelling, and also how to tell these stories in I don't want to just say a positive way, but in a really genuine way, which I think a lot of us in the community really, really care about. So before we dive into that, I just want to say hi to all of our wonderful Patreon subscribers. Thank you all for taking time to send some monies my way to help fund my website. That really helps a lot at the end of the year when I have to pay that. So thank you so much. If you're looking for something in terms of like a little bit extra every single week, I do have all the full video access. All of those episodes are on my Patreon, as well as bonus episodes. I do have some upcoming guest lectures at Simon Fraser University, where I went to school, and also some other guest speaking gigs that are up on there, which if you're looking for that, it's great bonus content, and you get to see who's coming on the show or what kind of topics I'm hoping to tackle and people I'm trying to source out for certain episodes. So a lot of cool creative process stuff from behind the scenes. Lots of great stuff on there. And of course, if you are the top tier of my Patreon, you do get a wonderful fan recognition shout out, which is fun. I think it's fun. I just want to say hello to Raina, who's hailing all the way from Sweden. We've got Dale Flood from Vancouver. That's where I am from. We've got Red Door Products. Hi, Dan, from Seattle. We've got McKenna King from Edmonton in Canada. Another Seattleite, we've got Via York, content creator, and we also have Eric Arajo, Geyser, and Snoo coming all the way from Germany. So really, really cool. I just love looking at the analytics in terms of like where you guys are from, and it's just really cool and to hear your experiences of like how sex work is in your corner of the world, because it's a not all one size fits all kind of deal, which you've probably heard about in many of the episodes here before. So thanks so much for supporting. If you are interested, we have tiers starting at $4 a month. That is US dollars, I think. Yeah, US dollars, starting a little to $4 a month, which you could check out. So check out all the goodies, test it out. You could do like a 1 month commitment, and if you're like, this is it, I've got everything that I need, you could just unsubscribe. But please stay on there. The community is great, and it's patreon.com/strippedbysia. That being said, again, we're talking about ethical storytelling, which is really important in our community, especially when it comes to dealing with such a marginalized group, especially in sex work. And there's so many different layers there. Sex work just being one umbrella of it all, but within marginalized group, you actually have further marginalized groups in there as well. So, really going to be talking about why do we storytell? How do we do this respectfully, ethically, authentically? Without exploitation, because that can often happen in media and in places. So I'm bringing on today a fellow sex worker and first time and queer identifying filmmaker of the documentary Fucking Sober. And also podcast. They also have a podcast as well called Madame Julie Moya and NYC's most famous brothel, talking about I guess kink and like BDSM and working in a brothel. I've listened to the first couple episodes of that too, which we'll get into a little bit later as well. But the person behind it all is none other than Em Vaughn. I'm so excited to bring her onto the show today. Em, are you there?
Hi, Sia. Yes, I'm here.
Glad to have you on. I'm so excited to talk with you today. And this is always like a very, very hot topic. And you've accomplished so much yourself too. And I'm just excited to get to know you further and also get the audience to get you all warmed up as well. But I mean, that's just like a little snippet of what I know about you. But I would love for you to kind of give yourself your own introduction in your own words and terms. So feel free to go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. I'm really honored to be on this podcast in particular. My name is Em. I am a first-time filmmaker. I write a blog and I co-host a podcast. And I just generally am passionate about archiving sex workers' stories from their own perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and key point there from their own perspective, I think is so important. Similar to how I do the show in here, also from their own perspective, because there are a lot of perspectives out there. There's so many stories to be told too, but each of them, each of these stories are valid in their own right. And I bring on different guests, as onto the show, including yourself, so people can really hear from a diverse voices, diverse perspectives, which really, really helps paint our community and our industry in a really beautiful light. But I mean, yeah, first time filmmaker, which is really exciting. I mean, yes, we're going to get into all the things, but like maybe we want to start at the very beginning in terms of like how you got into sex work, and then also if like that, how that overlaps with filmmaking and stuff as well, and talking about the show and of course your documentary.
Yeah, of course. So I'm originally from the South and I started working there. I just kind of got into it by accident. I mean, it was, of course, by choice, but,
Mm-hmm.
like it
Fall
didn't,
into things.
I fell into it a little bit. I
Fair.
think a lot of people can identify.
Yes.
Um, but basically, I was finishing my undergrad degree. Um, Started working a job. It was pretty grueling manual labor job. And my coworkers, not all of them, but some of them were on work release from prison. Uh, so having to kind of see that injustice on a daily, seeing these people's bodies be exploited on a daily, it was really like taking a toll on my mind and my body. And um, basically I was like, this is 12 an hour. I'm I'm watching my friends put up with these terrible work conditions. I don't know if I can like stay doing this work. So I had heard a friend of mine say that she was like a sugar baby, like she sugared, and I didn't really know what that meant. But she was like, "Oh, you get on seeking arrangements, and put a little picture with you and sunglasses on there, and like talk to guys." I'm like, okay, whatever.
Girl,
And
same. This is
yeah,
totally my
no.
entry too.
And so I met up with this guy who's like regular dad, like early 40s, couple kids, and he was like, "All right, you can be my sugar baby. Why don't you get a hotel room, and I'll meet you there?" And I was like, "Okay, I guess this is what sugaring is." And we had a session in the hotel room, and he left like 300 or something on the table, and I
Yeah.
was like, "This is more than I make a week at my shitty job." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it's definitely something I
Totally.
didn't like. That was full service escorting at that point. I didn't really
Hmm.
know that until
Yep.
later on. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, sugaring life is I still haven't done an episode on that. I am 200 plus episodes and I still haven't done it. I just feel like I have so many thoughts about it too, especially like when you and I both have like very similar entry points and like it's a casual, like, oh yeah, this just talk with older men. You go for dinner with them, you drink the best wine, you go to all these like Michelin star restaurants, but then no one ever talks to you about like all the things that other happen as well, behind closed doors. And personally, now that I can see it, it's just like a lot of like lowballing and mental games and mental
Yeah,
manipulation when it comes to sugaring versus escorting. But I'm sure you have opinions on that too.
definitely.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so I guess that was your entry point into the work. And, I'm sure you learned the ropes a little bit too. I mean, can you share a little bit about how your journey kind of transformed a little bit too in terms of like, you being really green? You're like, oh, I guess this is it. And, or like, coming at it later on with a more of a business minded focus and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, when I graduated college, I actually moved to NYC with my partner,
Mm-hmm.
and that ended up being like the best decision for sex work because of the
Yeah.
safety that I can kind of have here, because it is not de facto decriminalized, but
Mm-hmm.
we're mostly pretty free to do the work up here,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, so that changed everything for me, because in Tennessee, it was really scary because if something were to happen, it was more because we had to be like I had to be more isolated as like a worker in Tennessee. It was definitely like a little bit more dangerous, and if you were to
Mm-hmm.
get caught or anything, like your life was over,
Yeah,
in that respect.
for
So
sure.
coming to New York, definitely like helped me feel a little bit safer.
Mm-hmm.
And I started first by getting a tryst, because like you said on SA, like there's a lot of lowballing, there's a lot of mental games, there's a lot of men on there that know that there's young women on there that don't really have an idea of what they're kind of getting into, and so they take advantage of that. And I was really just tired of putting up with it.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I was just like let's take pictures and like let's get a tryst, and so they know what my rates are. Here's what it is. Like, I'm not doing
Yeah,
this like hour-long negotiation with you about like my worth or something, but
yeah.
that's what I started to do. And then worked kind of like in a collective with some other girls for a while, which was really beautiful because, like I said, feel like as like a independent provider, you're kind of isolated a lot, and you
Mm-hmm.
kind of do the work on your own. It's not like you have coworkers or things like that, but getting
Right.
connected to a bigger community was amazing. And there's definitely a community here. Like there was a swap chapter, and from that, we have community meetings like once a month and things like that. We talk about certain topics and there's all sorts of events that providers who want to create community with other providers that they put on here.
Amazing.
But from that, I working in the collective, we actually got tipped off or placed it by someone, I don't know. And we had to kind of cut ties and
Oh, wow. Oh, that's
disband
unfortunate.
from each other, which was really
Yeah,
hard. Yeah.
that is really
Um,
difficult. That's
yeah,
sad.
it was definitely very stressful, but I actually got into full body rub, like
Mm-hmm.
massage parlor work after
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's definitely been like, even though it kind of came out of a not, a negative circumstance, massage work definitely like changed the way that I do this work. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah. Can I ask how it's changed like your work in terms of like switching over and pivoting to massage work versus like escorting and even your time as a sugar baby?
Yeah, I work in a studio, like a shared studio. We do have a boss, but she definitely wants us to want to be there, like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I work in a studio with other girls.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always usually two girls there at a time. And this has been super beneficial because now I have like basically a coworker.
Yeah,
Like, I have
totally.
someone that I can just hang out with and I have all these shared experiences with, and it's been super life-changing, like going on little like dinner dates and tea dates with people that I work with and just like shit talking clients and talking about, but also like sharing, different like business ideas and tips, because there's a lot of my coworkers, they've been in it like 10 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just so much that I've learned, and I've experienced, and I'm just really grateful for that bond and
Yeah. That's definitely helpful for sure, and especially like even last week we talked about like how isolating this work can be. I mean, last week was a completely different episode, but talking about we're talking about like life as a cam model and also just like being an independent content creator, because you're just making all this content alone, like you don't have the socialization in terms of like having a quote unquote colleague. They can, like as you said, like go out for a coffee and like banter and stuff too. It's great having all the online community, but sometimes it's so nice to have someone like in person that can actually share the exact same experiences that you are also going through. I think that's so important to have. Not all of us have that anymore or can have that for certain reasons, but yeah, that's so probably really, really great for your mental health too.
absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like pivoting over to talking about like stories and your experiences, like you've dabbled a lot, as a lot of us have dabbled in the work. Um, talking about you know your work as like a filmmaker and starting that out and stuff too. I mean, we were talking at the top of the episode about like how important it is to ethically storytell and tell these stories accurately and genuinely. Maybe we can start there and like why that is important to you, and we can go ahead and expand that to why that's important also to be reflective in the community as well.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of sharing how uh, you came into kind of storytelling about other sex workers. I think similarly, like I just wanted to tell the stories of my friends that wanted their
Yeah,
stories to be told.
yeah.
Um, I definitely like, I have an understanding that documentation of other people like is kind of rooted in this like kind of racist colonial like anthropological lens, uh,
Mm-hmm.
which is, it's othering
Yes, it is.
other when documentation comes into play. And often, super exploitive. And I hope and think that documentation of people's experiences, I have hope that it's moving in the way of people who are documenting other stories are in the same community
Mm-hmm.
or adjacent
Yes.
communities to the people's story that they're telling. Um, so I definitely wanted to see more content um, of sex workers' stories in the media that were actually told by them,
Sex workers, yeah,
which
for sure.
seems simple, but there's
It's
I can't think of a mainstream example of, you know, a perspective that's accurately portrayed or from a person's own experience.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and the fact that like it's hard to even come up with like real examples. Like I could think of like Money Shot on Netflix, with like Siri Doll and like Guadadora and stuff too. But like other than that, like I can't think of anything that's like super recent or like relevant, because like a lot of times
Mhm.
it's some big company. Unfortunately, it's usually a man behind the camera,
Yeah.
trying to film for the male gaze, and it's met with the glamorization and it's sensationalized to the top. So it's like really really hard to take those pieces really seriously as a sex worker,
Mhm.
who just like to take it with a grain of salt. If I can share a quick story, like when I was getting slowly coming out of the sugaring part of the industry, there was a friend of mine who I well, no longer friends, but big restaurateur in Vancouver who decided he wanted to do a reality show pilot on sugar babies. And of course, he knew me like as a sugar baby and cast me on that pilot. And that, like, I honestly regret doing that damn freaking pilot, because it went viral in my city. And I didn't have a really great grasp of sex work at that time either, even though I was just starting to leave the industry and pivot myself out of there. But like, it was like, I'm glad it's not on the internet. I'm glad it's not on the internet anymore, because like it was so cringe. It just did everything that just um, solidified all these negative stereotypes about sex workers. And it was just such a terrible portrayal that I participated in. And like the messaging was just all wrong, and like things I just like don't agree with at all. And I find that a lot of sex workers, like, this happens to us, like will be hey, can you ask be part of my study and my research, can you be the subject of this new film or documentary that I'm doing? And then when it actually comes out, it's completely changed its tune, um, and bears on the side of like exploitative. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm sorry that that happened to you.
Yeah,
Um,
it sucked.
yeah, I mean, that's a really hard experience to kind of to live through and to process. And I'm sorry, yeah, it was your friend too, kind of
Yeah.
like you had trust there. And but yeah, I mean, being I guess like side tangent, but being a woman in film, and talking to other men who, you know, kind of do documentary or film, whatever.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, the access,
Yeah. Ugh.
It's like access. It's like, I'm no, these are my friends. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
it's
Because
the entertainment value for them.
yes, it's 100%
And
that.
that's not why I'm here. If I, hopefully, I wouldn't be, if I just saw the entertainment value, hopefully I wouldn't be trying to document people's story, because that's not what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, definitely. And that happens like so much, like it's I feel like they come in with an intention of something and then it just gets shifted, or the final product is like, oh, we need to make it more like, glitzy and like appealing for the audience. And this needs to go viral and, everyone needs to see it and blah, blah, blah. And it's just so heartbreaking when like you see that final product and you're like, oh my gosh, I do not want to have my name on this. Like, it's just frankly embarrassing, and also just reinforces like the wrong things about sex work. And when I say wrong things, it's just, again, going into those negative stereotypes and, putting the wrong message out there, I think is hard.
Hey everyone, it's Carly David. I'm the founder of PS Group. We're the creative marketing agency for sex workers by sex workers. We get it. Things are changing fast. Standing out in this industry is tougher than ever. But whether you need a killer website, eye-catching graphics, merch design, pro-level video editing, we got your back. Our fees are totally project-based too. We never work on percentages or commission. Visit us at sexworkmarketing.com, say hello, let's start a conversation, see how we can navigate these changes together.
Going into like your own storytelling, because you do have Madame the podcast, you also have your documentary Fucking Sober, both of which are about like colleagues or friends of yours in the industry. Can you tell us a little bit about like what your motivations and intentions are with both of the documentary and podcast, and like let's go from there.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a sex worker, but I'm also someone who identifies as being in recovery. Um, and that was kind of a hard community to kind of find. I'm a provider, but I go to meetings and I kind of feel a little bit isolated because because I'm a provider. And then when I go into provider circles, I feel kind of isolated because I'm sober.
Yeah.
Um, so meeting other people who are also in recovery and sex workers was really important for me. And I just made friends from there. And I think too, not only do we not have very good or accurate portrayals of sex workers from their own words, but also sex workers who are in recovery. I think, the recovery community and sex work, they're pretty adjacent to each other, is my
Yes.
understanding
Yeah, I would
and
agree.
in my experience. So I was like, there needs to, we need to, I started hanging out with my friends and asking them, would you like to be, kind of documented so that we can kind of put something out that says something about us? And I filmed about 5 people over the course of a few months.
Mhm.
And the person that kind of ended up sticking with it to the end was Brooke.
Mhm.
So my intention was to just have more representation of sex workers who are sober and in recovery, um,
Yes.
and just representations of sex workers telling their own story. And Brooke Johnson, who's a Vegas-based porn star, is the star of that documentary.
Yeah, that was incredible. And I saw the trailer too, as well. I mean, I really like that you're providing, especially what can be a niche topic, with sex workers in recovery. And like we have talked about like sobriety on the show and how to navigate that. But it can, especially when you are in recovery, it can be such a difficult, challenging, sometimes dark time to be going through that. And having to go through that alone is, I have never been through that, but like I can only imagine how difficult that must be. So I think it's important that you are doing a great job in terms of like creating more representation and inclusivity for folks that are that in that corner of the industry and are going through that. So thank you. What has been your experience? Because you mentioned Brick was the one that kind of stayed through till the end. Um, I think I want to talk about, talking about including people, telling people stories, but um, addressing that not everyone's stories would like to be told. And that can be for a various number of reasons: anonymity, protection of their children. Maybe they just want to start being more private. Again, there's so many different motivations in terms of like why people would want to participate in this. But can you share a little bit about your experience with any kind of pushback and stuff?
Yeah, definitely. I've lots of experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, kind of the jumping off point of, kind of the first moment where I was like, we need to be archiving our stories. I met with this woman, older woman. She's around 70, and
Mm-hmm.
basically sat down and had coffee, and I shared with her, what I did, and she told me, she kind of gave me a brief history of herself, that she was a provider from the 80s into the 2000s, and just kind of
Mm-hmm.
had seen this great shift of history and culture take place in NYC,
Mm.
as a sex worker. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, have you documented this somewhere? Like, this is, you know, this story is like really important, and it tells NYC history as well as the history of sex work here. It's just like so many important layered things, that I
Mm-hmm.
think the world like needs to hear. And she was like, no. She was like, I've been offered book deals, all of that. I've said no because, um, she said, for one, she had an adult son and wasn't comfortable with him knowing that, and two was just at a different point in her life and just didn't want to. She didn't want to go back there, basically. And
Yeah.
I, of course, understood, but it really like breaks my heart that so many sex workers, especially older ones who've experienced so much in their time as people and as providers and as, um, people under different political systems. It breaks my heart that stigma kind of erases that history, like
Yeah.
don't have access to it. And
Yeah.
that was kind of my jumping off point of like,
I
I
want to start doing this.
yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as like with the documentary, like I said, I probably filmed about 5 people total.
Mm-hmm.
But I noticed, people who weren't, already face out, like
Mm-hmm.
with when you're doing porn, you're face out.
You are always going to be face out for
You're always
sure.
going to be face out. Long story short, you're face out. But
Yes.
with providers who are full service escorts, they're a little bit more hesitant. I actually filmed quite a bit with a friend of mine,
Mm-hmm.
and she was definitely on board and enthusiastic, about it at first, but that
Yeah.
waned after a while. And that was like
Mm-hmm.
a big lesson for me. Like, just because someone is enthusiastic and wants to do it in the beginning doesn't mean that they're going to want to do that to the end and then have it
Right.
published, available to the public. So that was something, that I learned. And not
Mm-hmm.
to be mad, oh, we did all this filming, oh, we spent all this.
Right.
At the end of the day, if she's not comfortable with her story being told, I don't want to tell it or push it.
Of course. Yeah. And I think sometimes people might feel obligated to continue on without, despite their own hesitancies, but despite their own wishes. I feel like that sometimes people feel pressured into those kind of situations, and like once it comes out, and of course they like absolutely regret it, but they feel like they can't say no in those situations. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, especially the guilt trip. Like, we filmed all this content, we filmed all this stuff, and the answer is like no. As simple as it is, like no means no, and people
Mhm.
do have the agency and
Mhm.
can change their mind at any point too. So, I mean, that can put you in a sticky spot as a filmmaker sometimes in terms of having to pivot, but
That's part of it. Like if I'm always
Mm-hmm.
questioning whether or not I'm being ethical, then things like that are going to happen. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's frustrating, but in the long scheme of things, again, like I'm not here to like entertain audiences. I just want to like preserve history of people who I think matter a lot.
Absolutely. And like going on that point of terms of like entertaining audiences, that's like another thing too. Like I shared my story in the beginning because it was relevant, but you know, that was very much of like, this is for entertainment purposes. But
Mhm.
I know with like some filmmakers, you know, they're harping on a couple of things. Like there's two things that I feel like makes quote unquote makes good TV or makes good entertainment is either, you know, trauma or some
Mhm.
kind of sensationalized, you know, the best parts, the glamorized parts. And this is both specifically in talking about sex work because unfortunately there can be like a lot of trauma. There's a lot of like people always want to hear the bad. I like tell what's the worst part of this industry. Like the amount of times people have asked me that, the worst part of the industry. They would tell me the worst clients. I'm like, I don't want to share that with you because I don't want to bring up that trauma anymore. Like,
Mhm.
what makes you feel that you have the right to ask me about something like that, even though I don't know you, and like having to showcase and broadcast that story to the world. And then on the flip side, you know, with that sponsored divas show, like again, you can't find it online anymore, but it's called Sponsored Divas. Terrible name. But but talking about only the good things of the industry, and like there's all the money you can get, displaying of the money shot, displaying of the Cartier bracelets and the
Mhm.
Louboutins and all that kind of stuff. But like um how do we tell stories when it comes to sex workers and the sex industry in general, and trying to, I mean, obviously how to embrace all of this and do it in a delicate balanced way without being exploitative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always something I have to question within myself and, people who do similar things. I am a sex worker, so my experiences do align with some of the people I'm working with, but I'm also cis and white. So I
Hmm.
always have to be um, very intentional about, where my motivation's coming from. And I always have to question that.
Hmm.
And I think it's on the podcast, Madam, the podcast that I also work on. Um, to that podcast, there is a little bit of sensationalism. If you look at some of the titles of the podcast, it's like, they're kind of like what do you call it?
Like baity or clickbaity
Baity,
or like, yeah,
baity.
for sure.
Um, and I think with Julie Moya, who is the star of that podcast, I think it was a little bit of exception with her in this case, because I do definitely steer away from the sensationalism and glamorization of sex work, because that can be extremely harmful in so many
Hmm.
different ways. But for Julie as a person, she's been sensationalized in media a lot in the 90s and early 2000s, and been a person in headlines and been a person in a lot of publications. And,
Hmm.
basically, I had known her, my co host had known her, I almost worked for her.
Yeah.
um, she came to my friend and was like, I want my story to be told. She's,
Mm.
she's a little bit older, has some health issues, and she wanted her story to be told. And she had never told it from her perspective. It was always someone else's.
Right.
And he asked me, he was like, I want this to be an intergenerational conversation, and it's also important to note in the podcast, Julie's a madam, and she was a
Hmm.
provider for a long time, which is important, but she's not now.
Hmm.
And there is a power dynamic between providers and madams. And so
Hmm.
it was important as a podcast to, make sure that there was a voice there, trying to, I guess, challenge her different beliefs and perspectives about some things, to kind of question that power dynamic. and kind of bring it up, but also have this intergenerational conversation, because she's been been in the sex work industry since the 80s.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that mostly, like, as a storyteller, try to stay away from the sensationalization of stories. I think that can be very harmful. But I think in but if it is the case of that the person story who is telling the story, and they potentially want that part of it, that's also something to consider as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think like in true collaboration, of course, like you're gonna be working with the person, and you're really trying to get their point across, and really trying to elevate their voices. And of course, as you behind the camera, or like as a director and stuff too, like really, I mean, even with this show, like with the podcast, I've shared with you, like, this is a structure, this is, I don't want to say angle, but like these are the angles I'm wanting to bring out, and the questions I'm wanting to bring out on the show, and the conversations I'm hoping to have. I think it's really, really important that like it really comes from a very, very collaborative effort. That's why I always wanted to ask, like, is there anything that you want to add? Like, what can you, what do you want to bring to the show, without, for my show, without everything sounding so salesy and pitchy, and I want to promote this, like that's not the type of angle I want to have in my show, in terms of like having conversations. And the same thing goes with film too, really being able to uh, again, channel these voices out in a respectful way, that is that doesn't do them a disservice, right?
Yeah.
And actually, if I can say, like, what I do love about Madame the podcast, like, I love how it is very, how I would say, like, entry level, in terms of like you could be a person that's not in this industry, and your co-host does a really great job of like, hey, like, Julie will refer to this specific term, and this is what this means, and you're really breaking it down, so it makes it so much more digestible for the audience, so you don't have to like Google it, like, what did that acronym mean? You guys do a really, really great job at doing that, so I just wanted to like let you know before I forget. I mean, that was a side tangent, but like talking about you know filmmaking and the entertainment piece too. I know I'm sticking on that, but I think it's important because the internal struggle between what is going to quote unquote sell, what, like, how do you find the balance of like telling the stories? And of course there's so many boring parts of our industry, but people want to hear the juicy parts. People want to clip this part for social media, and for it to get hits and stuff like that. So like, how do I find that balance between the two without over sensationalizing things, and it gets lost, like the meaning and the intention is then lost at that point?
Yeah, definitely. That's something I think about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Finding that balance is hard, but I think what I tried to do is, again, try to question my motives each way.
Mm-hmm.
you know um whenever I can. And I think it's also very important, like, I may have a vision for something, but that vision doesn't matter if I don't have consent from the person that I'm documenting and and filming or writing about or speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
It always, always, always goes back to the autonomy of the person. And so I think that in itself kind of balances it out. When I was working with Brooke on Fucking Sober, they're like, I don't want this to be sensationalized. I don't want this to be a glamorized picture of sex work, because it's not a
Mm-hmm.
glamorous picture of sex work, like, in their experience.
Right.
So it was definitely, taking cues from the people whose story you're telling, I think is most important. And, consistently questioning your own kind of beliefs and motives around what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in your process, like, like, of course, you have a certain vision and stuff that you would like to bring to light. over the creative process and filmmaking of your documentary, or have those visions changed? Have you been had to pivot? Have you been oh my gosh, like I didn't even think about it in this perspective kind of thing? Like, have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, definitely. There's so many examples.
I bet.
Um, let's see. Okay, so this one specific example, I was filming another porn star for the documentary, and it went great. I loved this person, what they had to say, their story, everything. And they were super enthusiastic to be a part of it, the documentary. Come to find out a little bit later, this person is actually involved in a lawsuit against them, and
Oh no.
and it has to do in the sex industry, in a porn shoot.
Yeah.
And as much as I love this person and what they had to say and their story, I said, I can't continue to kind of document your life if I can't talk about this lawsuit that you're involved in, because there's another voice behind that lawsuit and why she's suing, and I would want the audience to have that perspective of
Totally.
what the situation is, because that's not being transparent. If I'm just, here's this person and there's no baggage, there's no lawsuit
Right.
connected to this person, that's not being, very honest. And
Right.
he said, we can't talk about the lawsuit. We can't document
Right.
it for legal reasons. And also, he just didn't want to.
Yeah.
And so I had to unfortunately tell him, that we can't continue, because while I want your story heard, there's also, if we continue, there's another story another person's life that we're kind of hiding behind a curtain in a way. Like, I would want her perspective as well. And if we can't have that, then, so yeah, having to pivot and like drop him, it was really hard, and he was really upset about it too.
Yeah.
But I believe it was like the right thing to do. And yeah, everything
Yeah.
was supposed to happen.
Especially with the transparency conversation, that is so important. Like, I've also been in situations like that too. I've had the show for 5 years, and I do my best to try to vet for everyone that comes on the show. But when things transpire later on, like long after the episode comes out, and like I hear about it, and I have like listeners email me to be like, hey, did you hear of this about this? You've interviewed this person before, and like for me, like, of course, if I'm able to talk to that person, great. But usually, at that point, unfortunately, I have to like take down those episodes because like, it's not something that I believe in. But I also think it's really important to have those perspectives on the show, like the other voices that we don't get to hear, and even like with like new perspectives, basically. I think it's important to, again, really encompass everything that's happening within our industry. Like, for an example, like I had the founder of Choice, which is like a new platform where you can book providers on, and I had the founder of that, Eric Reckner, on the show, and I know some people don't like him, but I also want to give options out there for providers that are looking for another, platform they can safely take deposits in and provide payment and all that stuff too. So like, and it's hard because it's especially when you love the episode and stuff too, and then people are not happy with something. It's part of the process. For sure. It can be
Yeah,
difficult sometimes.
definitely. Yeah, thank you for that example. And with Madam, I know that in a similar kind of situation, there are going to be providers that kind of hear the way that Julie has done things, and her decision making process, like as a Madam, and they're not going to be happy with what they
Happy.
hear. And
Yeah.
similarly, I hear things that she says, I'm also not too happy about it. But it's kind of saying also, if we're only kind of giving platforms to the people whose stories are perfect, who don't make mistakes or wrong decisions or put against hard walls sometimes, are we truly saying like all sex workers' stories are worthy to be told?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's important to think about, and thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I mean, people are not perfect. They fuck
Yeah.
up a lot, and but there is a line you have to draw, of course.
Yeah, I've definitely drawn some of those lines and have taken those certain episodes. If you guys are like, where's episode something something? I'm like, it's gone for a reason. Unfortunately, it's not available.
Yeah.
In terms of talking about like, telling other people's stories, I know that you've documented Brooke's story, you've documented Julia's story, well, yeah, on the documentary and also on your podcast. Why do you choose to highlight other people's voices and not yours in this sense?
Because my story's pretty boring. I'm just kidding. um, I do document it in the ways that I feel comfortable. Obviously, I wear the sunglasses. I'm not a face out provider. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so obviously there's some like ironies to, I'm telling other sex workers stories and I can't fully be out myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely tell my story in the ways that I feel comfortable with. I
Mm-hmm.
have a blog, which is available on my website. It's a free like Substack, and I just did it just because. I mean, probably why you started your blog too. It's just like I
Mm-hmm.
just want an outlet to write about these experiences, and some of my friends can read them and I guess ask me questions, because I'm okay. They're my friends, and I'm okay at talking to them about these things. And it's not much more than that. Um, and also on the podcast, I talk about some of the experiences that I've had myself, even though it does center around Julie. It is an intergenerational conversation. So she does
Mm-hmm.
ask me questions about my experience, which I share. So I definitely think like in the future, I want to be more open about my story and be more public facing. And there's definitely things that I'm kind of archiving in my life now, whether it be like voice notes or um, different, I don't know, things that I'm doing to kind of like retain my day-to-day life, like little histories in my day-to-day life.
Yeah.
But we'll see, I'm just like, we'll see where that goes in the future. And I want to be like ready to be public with it when I do.
Yeah. And if you choose to be, and
Mhm.
sometimes you're not going to be ready ever, and like, but it's nice to even have those little voice notes for your own personal consumption and for you to look back on too. Like it's really cool. Like I kind of wish I had that old blog back in the day. My memory is taking it down. I would have
Yeah.
loved to read all those early experiences when in sex work
Oh
when I
my
didn't
gosh.
realize it was sex work.
Right. Oh my gosh. You let me know if you ever find your old
Yeah.
blog because I'd love to read.
It was interesting. It had a lot of hits back in the Alex locally. It had a lot of hits here, but like I don't know. Rain City Chasing. I'll have to double check to see if that is a login somewhere on a WordPress. But going back to you, Julie, I mean, what do you hope to achieve with your documentary, with your podcast, future aspirations even? Are you going to continue going down this filmmaking route, storytelling in different mediums? Because you storytell in a lot of different mediums, actually. So I'd love to hear like what's next for you.
Um, I don't know what's next.
I love that answer, though. You don't have to know.
I hope to continue down the filmmaking route. It's not even something that I considered I could do before making this documentary. I never thought I could do something like that, but like I was like on the way to document Brooke's story and okay, learn to work the camera and the shutter speed and okay, like let me learn how to work this really simple audio system so that we can get it was something I never imagined for myself, but through like the documentary process, I'm like, no, actually, I know how to work a camera and I understand a little bit about sound equipment. So um, I'm making another documentary right now in my hometown, and yeah, just continuing to write. There's a little short that I want to write for Humpfest.
Oh, yay.
I really love that festival, and it's going to be centered around the massage worker experience. But it's
Oh,
also
great.
funny,
Yeah.
and yeah, I just want to continue documenting sex worker story in like the most ethical and accurate way possible, and whatever that kind of um, appears to be like, that's what I want to do. So I'm very open to whatever.
I love that. And again, like you've brought up so many great points in this episode, and it really sounds to me you're really trying to make a good effort in terms of like you keeping this so genuine, real, and raw for sex workers, and especially like when it comes to our stories. I think you're really taking a lot of steps that have taken some careful consideration and are thoughtful in really bringing the sex worker experience to the forefront, but also doing it in a really respectful way. So I can't wait to watch. And of course we'll have some time to share about like where and how you can access this information and documentary, of course, your podcast. But there is a question that did come in from the audience as well. In relation to our story, in relation to our episode. um, this person writes in from X. I have a memoir coming out in December about my time as a stripper 25 years ago. I struggle with it because it's my truth, but my experience isn't all inclusive. I feel like the industry has gotten worse since my time. How to fix that? Also, how can we see more BIPOC voices in memoir?
Um, I have a couple. Well, I wonder what this person means about worse. Worse.
I have
And
insight as a stripper. I have my own insight as a stripper, and like, this is just my own personal experience. Like I worse in a different way in terms of how the strip industry has shifted, in my opinion. Like before, it used to be like really big shows and feature costumes, 5 6 7 piece costumes. Now it's like the clubs are really pushing for, we need to sell more dances, we need to sell more VIP dances. And I'm only speaking about my experience here in Vancouver, Canada, so it's very different than the rest of North America, actually. So but for myself, like, it's just the money isn't there anymore. There's a lot of people really demanding for extras all the time. I don't know if it's just now or something, but that the strip industry is like depleting a bit. Like a lot of strip clubs are closing now. Like that, in my opinion, that is the way it has worsened. And of course, like with like porn being a new thing and being so like free porn being so accessible, I think a lot of people are just resorting to that, and like live entertainment slowly weaning out. So that's how I am, like with my own personal experiences and how I've been in the industry, in that part of the industry, for like 8 years, 6 years, sorry. That's how I would digest that part. But it's however you like, this person hasn't shared exactly, but it's up to you how you've digested the question.
Wait, could you repeat it again? Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. So this person has a memoir coming out in December about the time as a stripper 25 years ago. I struggle with it because it's my truth, but my experience isn't all inclusive. I feel like the industry has gotten worse since my time. How to fix that? Also, how can we see more BIPOC voices in the memoir?
Yeah, I think this, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a stripper. I'm not a dancer, so I can only speak to my experience. But
Of course.
I think just in general, staying true to your experience is all you can really do. If you want to stay accurate and genuine in your storytelling, it has to be from you, and you can only tell your experiences. I
Yes.
think if you want to see more variety of experiences in the media and memoir, BIPOC voices, I think a good solution would be to, if you know someone or hear someone that's trying to write a memoir, make a documentary about their own experience, about other marginalized people's experiences, I think what you can do is you can put your money towards them directly.
that.
I think you can help fund them doing their own projects and doing their own storytelling about themselves. So that would be my advice,
That's
instead of
actually
trying
really
to tell them
great.
yourself.
Yeah, that's actually a really great recommendation because like that one, I personally don't believe that you would remain true to yourself. Like also you were in the industry, the strip industry 25 years ago, which 25 years ago, that landscape was so different. Um, I mean, historically speaking, at least here in Vancouver, there were a lot of black and brown bodies that were in specific areas of the lower mainland. That had specific clubs for BIPOC people. When we're talking about the stripping industry in, like, say, like downtown Vancouver, then there are more white bodies in certain areas there. So, like, I think if you mention that, and I don't actually know what city or where you're writing in from, if you can look into the history of that and include that, that is still acknowledging different bodies and different people from different backgrounds in your memoir, but also acknowledging and saying that, like, maybe in your experience there weren't actually, maybe it was very white, and
Mhm.
acknowledging that, and then how that has maybe shifted depending
Mhm.
geographically where you're located. I think that might be a way to do that, but also to fix it. Tip your strippers, go out in person. That's what I would do. Like, strippers love tippers. Like that's what I would do. If you know, if they're also on OnlyFans or any kind of pay subscription platform, you can also support there as well. If they have a wish list, you could buy something off of their wish list.
Mhm.
Giving it to the dancers directly rather than giving it to the club would be my recommendation to you, listener. Yeah. I have another whole episode. I have thoughts and feelings as a stripper that's almost on her way out. I think I have many thoughts and feelings about that. But going back to you, I mean, I would love for you to share with the audience, like, where can we find Fucking Sober, your documentary? Where can we listen to your podcast, Down the Podcast? And where can we find you in general? Plug all the things now.
Okay. I'm still new to the social media stuff, but I have a website, emvaughn.me. So it's emvaughn.me, and you can kind of find everything there. The podcast is there, and as well as all platforms, Spotify, Apple, what have you. And then access to my Substack is there, which is completely free. Um, and as far as Fucking Sober, there's actually weird politics around premiering at film festivals. So I actually can't
Oh.
show it publicly,
Hmm.
which is so many things that I've learned about the film industry that I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, are we serious right now? But
I'm so sorry to
yeah,
hear that.
unfortunately, until it premieres at a festival, I can't show it publicly.
Hmm.
But the trailer is accessible on my website, and you can follow Brooke Johnson on Instagram, and you can watch their content. They put out their
Yes.
own content, and yeah, I think that's all the plugs.
That's all the places. Keep it simple. Thank you so much for joining us today, Emma. I really loved this nuanced conversation. Because it's always like a challenge. Like, I've had episodes before, maybe two episodes talking about, more about, like, in media and journalism, how can we do better and stuff too. This conversation never does get old.
Mhm.
So I'm really, really glad that you're able to share your opinion and also your perspective, and even share a bit about your story as well. And while elevating others as voices, I think it's so great. And I think you're taking a lot of great steps in terms of, like, doing this in a genuine way. Because our community is very opinionated and very protective, though, very defensive about our community and
Yeah,
our
and
stories.
yeah, in valid ways. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I'm hoping that listeners that this gave you some food for thought for this episode. So if you want to follow Em and keep up with where you can, when and where you can find Fucking Sober, follow, do all the things all on the website. They're all accessible there. If you are wanting to do some homework and help out the show, you could rate 5 stars and write a lovely review on Apple and on Spotify. That helps people find the show. So if you are loving these free resources, I say free because it's been free forever, you could do so there. If you want to contribute financially, you could do that by joining Patreon. It's patreon.com/strippedbysia. And if you want to get in touch with myself, I'm most active on X, which is Stripped by Sia, or my Instagram. I'm there sometimes too. I need to update those a lot more, but it's Stripped by Sia podcast. And if you want to be on the show, feel free to reach out. I'm always getting DMs and lots of information, but I would prefer if you did it on the website, which is strippedbysia.com. And there's a contact button there. You can fill in the form. I just would love to hear your episode concepts, some general spark notes of what you want to speak about, just so we can, again, as what we mentioned on this episode, really collaborate on creating something that's going to be really valuable for listeners and also do yourself justice too. So so that's all the homework I have for you all. It's new episodes every single Sunday, launching at midnight Pacific Standard Time, and I will see you all in another episode next week. Thank you so much, Em, for joining us today. It was truly a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. You're listening to Stripped by Sia, hosted, produced, and edited by Steph Sia. Music by Ted D. Graphic design by Maria Bellandarama, and photography by Ian Davern.